welcome to this new edition of the Water Show. You've seen from the title that we have quite of a special edition, so I thought let's have a fancy introduction and you're a bit behind the scenes. As you see now behind me, we can go a bit into all of those details. Please tell us in the chat today where you're at, what are your questions. Everything's going to be very interactive today. But before all of that, hi Björn, how are you?
Hi, Antoine. I can't really hear you at the moment. Give me a second. Something went wrong here. 1 second.
That's really behind the scenes. I hope that it's only wrong for you and not for everybody. But actually,
Hi, Antoine.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No.
Okay, you see that guy is again using AirPods.
Sorry, Antoine.
So tell us in the chat if there's anything you want to know about us today. The topic is going to be how you build your personal brand a bit everywhere on the internet, but especially on social media. So that's one of the main topics. But it's also about what we've tested with Björn, what works, what doesn't work. It's a bit of a holiday special, a July special. And let's be honest and transparent, it's also a bit of a COVID special because I'm positive and Björn is positive, but we are two very positive people. So I hope that we'll still have a good show despite all of that. And that being said, let me just kick off our show.
Welcome,
So-
everybody. Also from my end. Sorry about the earpods. They switched off for whatever reason. They didn't want to start. Maybe they are also affected a little bit by COVID. As Antoine said, yeah, we are a little bit COVID station today here in Germany as well in France. But anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome to our summer edition, to our special edition. And one thing I have to say, Antoine, is I was really surprised how tidy your desk is.
Yeah, I have to say, maybe I cleaned it because I knew that you would see it. But yeah,
Ah.
sometimes it's pretty clean. Sometimes, not always. So actually, the topic today is not about my desk. The topic is about everything we've tried on the internet. And I think that's worth jumping it straight into it because honestly, there's quite a lot to unpack. And that will start in a second with LinkedIn. But just before we start with LinkedIn, I'd like to mention here and to discuss shortly with you, Björn, the topic of personal brands, because you're a specialist of that. You're a specialist of employee advocacy, of personal brands. And I thought it's maybe good to explain a bit what we mean by personal brands and what's the interest in developing that. So how would you describe the personal brand and what would you say about it?
Is a good question. Thanks for saying that I'm the expert, but I'm saying I can give the credit back as well. I mean, a personal brand means you describe what you stand for and what you stand against. So that is, I think, the most important fact, that you are telling the people what your opinion is, what do you think about certain facts, and what you maybe don't like, what you don't agree with. So that's a little bit, you get a little bit the personality. People get, let's say, well, they are, it's easier to come in touch with you. They know you better, especially nowadays. I mean, look, we are in a global world, so that means the water industry doesn't stop at the border. So we can't meet each and every person. So if you want to get on a personal relationship with someone which don't know you and is far away, then you need to build up something like a personal brand. That's what I would say. So it is really about you. It's about your personality. You tell the people who you are.
And actually, that's something where we would need you in the chat today because we have a bit that question, that discussion regularly with Björn to know who are the people a bit like us in that industry, which are pushing a message, which are building that personal brand and defining who we are, like you just said, Björn. So I have that rolling question ready for you here down. It's pretty simple. It's not about deciding who has the biggest ego at all. That's not the point. The point is really we want to see who do you feel are the top three, top five, top 10, whoever influencers, and then Björn is going to hate me for the term influencer in that water word. The idea there is that we firmly believe, Björn and me, that we know the ones which we've met, we know the ones we've interacted with, but maybe there are many others, maybe you, maybe some people you know and we don't know. So it's really interesting for us if you could just share with us your lists and the people that you would suggest here to be the top water influencers. Björn, why do you hate the term influencer?
I mean, where does the influencer come from? I mean, influencer, these kind of words are influencing someone else to do something maybe they don't want to do. For instance, I mean, if you go on all the other channels like Instagram, Facebook, you're an expert in, you see all the kind of influencers who are telling me all the time how the new sneakers look like and how cool they are, and they want to influence me to buy these cool sneakers. But that's not what we do. We don't influence, the water industry going from this UF to that UF or from this installation to that installation. That is not what we do. That is a total different term. So we don't influence someone. Maybe we give our opinion and help them having a similar opinion. But let's say our sake is not, let's say that if I influence you, Antoine, with the next UF and you're going to buy the next UF, that I get a commission. That's not the case. And that's why
Okay,
I'm saying we are not influencers. I
I
feel like
don't
we're
want to open too much of a sidetrack here, but let me disagree a bit with you actually, because for instance, my company GF Piping Systems is doing piping systems out of plastics, which means we are influencing people to tell them how better we believe plastic is as compared to metal. So I would definitely endorse the term influencer. When I interviewed on my podcast Mina Guli, for instance, who's running around the world and has millions, if not billions, of people following her on that, she's clearly an influencer in the sense she doesn't want people to run. She doesn't want people to make her famous. She wants people to get aware of water scarcity. So you're influencing people to get aware of something. And if you look at, I mean, even what you do, you influence people because you're saying maybe your marketing isn't really to the point where it should be. Maybe you're not using the right techniques. Maybe you're not.
Yeah, but you're fully right. In the end, I have a sales funnel behind, right? And most probably with GF you have also. But I'm not going around and saying, "Well, your marketing is shitty, and if you want to have another marketing, then come to me." Or you are saying, "Hey, your valve is shitty. If you want to have a new one, come to me." You're giving something, you're giving more, you're giving value, you're giving content, you're giving so much more. In
Clever
the end,
influence.
maybe the solution is that you can help, but that's not the first goal. But the influencer is saying, well, here, that's a new iPhone, please buy one because I get 10% discount, I get a 10% commission on that as well. So that is influencing. So that's
Okay.
what
Sorry, I was the one starting the sidetrack, but I have to be cautious of the time. So I propose you to open our first chapter for today. And you would have guessed, knowing your profile and knowing my profile, the first chapter is obviously LinkedIn. So on
Do you have
LinkedIn,
any experience with LinkedIn? Yeah.
a
And I
bit,
have never seen you.
a bit. What I like to do here on LinkedIn is we will have three sections: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Just because I love that movie, so I thought that might be interesting to look at what
Which
works.
movie is that?
You don't know it? Um,
No.
Maybe I'm doing a wrong translation because that's how we call it in French. It's one of these spaghetti western, with Harrison. Oh no,
Not
ah,
Harrison Ford. Okay, okay, I
forget me.
got
I'm,
you.
I'm
I
gonna say
got you.
only stupid shit. But I see that you don't know the movie, so maybe that was a French reference. But the good is going to be what works. The
Hmm.
bad is what doesn't work or what you should avoid because it's really really bad. And Rick confirms that it's the right translation, or is saying that the right translation is something else. So let's see. And the ugly is something which would be in between, which might be working but maybe not worth the effort, or which is borderline and maybe you shall not do. But just before that, I wanted to have just a discussion on the numbers, and I made I made a stupid thing, which is I used a tool which
Clint
is called
Eastwood, yeah.
Linkalize.
Why I'm not surprised that Jim knows that it is Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. Yeah, sorry. How can I mess them up? So the tool I use is called Linkalize. Forget the tool. It's just about something interesting, which is out of all these, let's say, wannabe influencers out there. Björn hates the term, but wannabe influencers still. I'm the one with the least followers. So Björn is bigger, Walid is bigger, Jim is bigger, Adam, whoever, just drop the name in the chat. But I believe in terms of pure numbers, everybody's ahead. So that's what you see here. I mean, I have contacts, but when you look at the followers, I have those 2.3 followers. But what is interesting, forget the $208. It's not about money today. It's about the engagement per post, which means that's what I would call influence. When what you put out there is interesting enough for people to influence, to trigger a reaction. And 1.68%, if you don't have a benchmark, may sound pretty low, but a stellar influence, a stellar reaction on LinkedIn would be around 2%. So 1.68, let me pat myself in the back, sounds not too bad. And if I look at what that tool is giving me, they're giving me an engagement rating A. Again, it's not about patting myself in the back. I just have all the examples. So Björn here, Björn, you would be having almost 4 times more followers, but your engagement per post is lower, which of course makes sense as well, because if you have more followers, sorry about that
Chinese are
one.
calling again.
If you have more followers, of course, your engagement is lower, and yeah, you have still a B rating, and it's even more spectacular if you go a bit higher up the food chain with our good friend Walid Curry, who was with us twice on that show. His engagement per post is at 0.3%, and if we go to the one I would believe to be the king of the game, Alex Passini, with his 46.5 thousand followers, he's also around 0.3% of engagement per post. So what I wanted to have here as a discussion with you, Björn, is yeah, what's the good metric to look at if you want to know if you're
I have one question. I have one question. I just, I mean, I saw the numbers first time, right? So, what was the engagement rate of Walid?
0.28%.
28. So less than Alex, because
Roughly the
or
same.
let's say roughly same. Okay, because what you can see, I mean, if you have higher numbers, right, the engagement rate goes down, which makes sense, right? Somehow. So that means you have the highest engagement rate, but on the same time you have the lowest numbers of followers. Whatever that means. Maybe you have just hardcore followers. And Alex and Walid, they have followers, maybe they don't care or they don't know. I'm not judging, right? That's all I'm saying. Because I mean, if they have 30,000, I mean, it's easier to know 2,000 instead of 30,000. So maybe that's the reason. But let's say, how important are the numbers?
That's the question. That's
That's the question.
really the
And
question.
I would say, I mean, as I started personally, I mean, sure. I mean, we all looked at the numbers, and let's say, if we see that we have I don't know, we have a post and we have 10,000 views or interactions, and I don't know, then maybe we are happy, but it doesn't count. It makes us proud in the first moment, but I have realized, especially with my business, it doesn't matter, because my business, the clients out of my business are coming from posts which I have maybe just 20 interactions, where I have a cool shirt. The algorithm don't like that. Most of my followers don't like that, but maybe I have 200 people who like that, and then I get the contact. So that is the important thing. So as I started to understand that, I totally stopped thinking about the numbers. I'm happy. Let's say last week I shared a post, Walid and myself. Hey, we went to Valencia. I mean, he was winning this kind of a war, and yeah, was cool. And we got 100. I got 100 interactions. The post I did the day before was much more important from my perspective, because this was about sustainability and profitability for each and every company. So there was much more value behind that, but there is less interactions. So here it comes. LinkedIn is also social media, and social media means interaction, social interaction. So if you post something personal, or let's say with someone else, with a person, it is for the audience better. They like it more. Yes, that's true. But in the end, maybe it doesn't help your business. It doesn't help your business. And that's why I totally stopped thinking about numbers. I don't care. Really, I don't care anymore.
Interesting, because I would agree with you on a good size of it, which is that numbers are not that important. But still, when you get crickets, sometimes you're just wondering, because maybe one person is sufficient if it's the right person, but how do you know that one viewed what you did? So that's why I propose you to have a look at the good. So, in terms of the good, Björn, what works for you on LinkedIn? What's the format which works all the time?
My format is pretty clear. I have some content which is, I call it the kind of expert content. So that means I'm talking about my stuff in terms of marketing strategy, business development, which has an infographic which goes a little bit into deep. This is one piece. The other piece is I'm posting something kind of social content. So that means me personally totally good with my company, together with Vali, together with you at EFAT, something like this. And the other one is maybe a kind of pitch content that I invite people, going in contact with me, having a call with me, figuring out whether we want to have business together. And these kind of, yeah, exactly. And these kind of mixture, that is what the good thing is. It doesn't matter what the format is, right? Whether it's a carousel or just an image, or what, or just text. But this format, right? These having this cycle, that helps me a lot. So that is my good.
When you say cycle, how often would you post each of them?
Honestly, I always try to post 3-4 times a week, but I'm mostly never able to post more than 2 times, maybe 3 times, sometimes just 1 times a week. It is once a week, because it is so time consuming. Everything is time consuming, and that is a price for that, right? If you really want to build up personal brand, I mean, we are talking about different levels today. It is time consuming. It is so much time consuming. In the end, if you win a client, hey, you have to deliver as well, right? I mean, winning clients is one thing with personal brand, with LinkedIn, but then you have to deliver as well.
So again, in a nutshell, what would be your first advice is to have this cycle of one which is your deep expertise knowledge, one which is promoting the company, like the social element, and what was the third?
For me, it's a pitch. I
The
call it the
pitch.
pitch content.
Okay. Okay. So you have these three which are making like your flywheel and which are coming.
Correct. A kind of flywheel. I mean, sometimes, I mean, it is not. It's not 30%, 33%, 33%, 33%. I mean, the expert content and the social content is much more than the pitch content. But you have to find the formula how often you can bring, the expert content together with the social content until you bring a pitch content. Pitch
Okay.
is, conversion rate with a pitch is totally low, right?
So yeah, if we look at this frequency of stuff, I mean, I'm posting less than you. I'm posting once a week. Um, but just to name our two examples of before, so Alex and Wallet, they would be the most extreme people I know to that extent, because they might be posting 5 or 6 times a day. So, what do you think of that approach? How would you?
The question is, I mean, let's coming back to you. I mean, what is your good? What is your good? I mean, you can see, let's say, let's talk about you and me, right? We have different approaches. Even Walid has a different approach. I mean,
Absolutely,
he is
absolutely.
I mean,
I'm
I
trying to
talked to
trigger
him.
him so that he comes in the chat and mention, because I know he said he would be watching. So
Yeah, but I was talking to him, and how did he mention this post last week? It's a kind of influencer post, or a kind of just him at the airport, right? That he arrived in Valencia. But the approach, for instance, for you are just promoting your podcast with LinkedIn, and you're using different formats. I'm trying to promote myself together with the company and selling in the end my product.
I think that goes back to what you were saying about why are you doing it, which is the step one in the strategy. And actually, I'm a firm believer in the concept from Dave McClure, the R framework. So, see, I knew I could trigger him. Um,
There he is.
um, no, what I wanted to mention here is the R framework is awareness, activation, revenue, retention, referral. And I think all the businesses work pretty fine if you look at the framework that way. And to me, social media isn't my activation trigger. Social media is my awareness step. Which means it's driving people towards the podcast. So the first step in the funnel would be social media. The second step in the funnel would be the podcast. And once we create that intimacy with the podcast, then the third step in the funnel would be to have an in-person meeting or to have a one-to-one conversation or something which brings it a bit offline, even if it's online but one-to-one. And there I go to the activation and ultimately to the next steps of revenue, referral, retention.
But
And
what's
again,
your good? What is your good in terms
actually,
of LinkedIn?
my what? Sorry, my good. Um,
You're good.
yeah, you have COVID, so you have a weird accent today.
Sorry,
So,
sorry for
no,
that.
no, no. Sorry. Actually, the good is changing. That's the interesting thing because if I
Hmm.
look at the raw numbers, there's one thing which works like all the time, which is whenever I do a joke about my daughters, like oh, the big daughter did that and the small daughter did that, and that gets thousands of views. But that's not good because it's not driving anything. So to me, the good used to be the infographic. That was really good. I was putting that infographic every week, and that was when LinkedIn loved carousel posts. So having the
Yeah.
carousel out there, that was brilliant. I mean, I didn't have much to do and I was getting my fair thousands of views pretty easily. And then LinkedIn decided that the carousel was a bit less trendy. And since then, I'm a bit struggling to renew the format just because the core of people who like the infographic. So I cannot get rid of the infographic. And I just have so much time in a week, which means I cannot replace the infographic by something else because people like the infographic and I cannot add
Mm.
something on top of the infographic because I'm already producing the infographic. So the good to me is kind of a struggle nowadays. I have lots of uglies, if I want to say it that
Lots of
way.
uglies. Let's take another good one. What about videos? Let's say have 1 minute, 2 minute. I mean, the maximum you have if you want to have a native video on LinkedIn, the maximum length is 10 minutes, right? If I'm not completely wrong.
Yeah,
Someone
you
should
can
change
cheat
that.
it. You can cheat it. Actually, what we're doing right now might be recorded. It's live actually, but it could be recorded, and we could make it as a live, and then you can go for 4 hours straight. But you're right. If you're just posting a video, it's 10 minutes.
What is your experience of that? I mean,
Ah,
we could ask Jim. I mean, Jim is I think once in a month or every second week they are posting these snippets out of the podcasts they have with the banner, right? So even that works pretty well. I mean, in terms of number, that's all I see.
yeah, it's a definition of what you define by number. Honestly, when I'm pushing a video like a short or less than 1 minute, it gets some thousands of views. So to that extent, it's good, but it doesn't convert to anything. I didn't find the golden key, which converts people watching a 1 minute
Mhm.
video just because they're scrolling in the middle of the feed to the next step in my funnel, which would be to drive them to Spotify or to Apple Podcast or to wherever they get their podcasts
Mm.
and to get to listen to that cool down wastewater podcast and to go a bit deeper in a topic. So it works as this raw infotainment, and maybe we have a brilliant example of that. Let me look for it right here. I mean, Alex is the specialist of that, of having a video which is just below
Yeah,
1 minute, so it gets autoplay and which drives, I mean, thousands of people to watch it. So video can be very powerful.
but here again, I mean, what is the strategy behind that, right? I mean, Alex is posting a lot of stuff, good stuff in terms of water. So everything what is related to this water and Niagara Fall, something like this here, and he get thousands of views. But let's say the question again is, what is your goal? Who do you want to reach?
Actually,
And that
that
is that is
example
that is
here,
that is the question. If you just want to build an audience, which is doesn't matter who that is, whether he is working at the airport, at the same time you have maybe some construction worker, at the same time maybe you have someone from the water industry, and they all are interested somehow in water. Okay, that is cool. But let's say if you really have a kind of business model and you have a niche of target group, right? You want to reach out, then you have to be careful because then you are overgoing this a little bit. My
Actually,
perspective.
yeah, what's interesting with the video I just showed is that, to my knowledge, and if Alex drops in the chat, he's happy to correct me, but he doesn't sell this kind of services. And I know people who are doing hydrology and hydro. I mean, coming from my former school, I used to be a hydraulic engineer at some point. I'm not sure I could do it anymore, but who are posting these kind of videos as well, and which are making incredible thousands of views, because apparently there's really, if you're into that, there's a niche on LinkedIn. People love that kind of stuff, but that's
Absolutely.
actually what they sell. They sell the
Absolutely.
monetization. They sell, I mean, same with what Katyam is doing quite a lot with what Luke Butler is posting, like showing a snippet of what he does over just less than a minute, and then people go to that. What Wim Odenart is doing as well with what they do at AM Team. They do
You teaser.
also.
You use that as a kind of teaser,
Yes. So I would
right?
say video works if it's part of your funnel. If it's not part of your funnel, I would call it the ugly, because still video,
Okay.
yeah. If it's
The-
something you take right and you put there, there's not a lot of effort. If you do video like, not to put myself in the spot, but like I do video, it's days of editing. So I'm not
True.
investing days of editing if
True.
it's not for much.
Sometimes I'm just using this video format as I would talk to you right now, right? So I'm just recording myself. I'm putting my thoughts into the camera. So I mean, there is not much of editing. I mean, I just record this once and then I shoot it out. But the interesting part of that is if you're talking later to a client you never talked to, and he's coming to a video call and then he's telling you, oh, this setup I know. I feel that I have been to this setup with your desk, with your room even before. And that is interesting, though they feel familiar with you.
Actually, what you mentioned here is very interesting, because I mentioned how, to me, social media is the first step of the funnel. The second is the podcast. The third is that one-to-one call, which would happen in that same piece, which is not a studio. It's my desk. So the calls happen at the same place. And if I show you that view, actually, um, when people drop into the call and they discuss with me, it's the perfect icebreaker. The first 2 minutes of the call are always like, "Oh, interesting setup you have here. Why do you have that?" And then
Exactly.
I explain why I have the setup, how the pandemic helped because I was at home quite a lot, and that is what I really would put in the good. You're fully right, because you're creating that sense of people already knowing you, even if you formerly never spoke to them, and you
Mm.
just back from Wex. And not mentioning that because I suspect that to be the place where you got your COVID, but
Yes.
what I want to say with that is that we've seen that when we were together at EFAT, we've seen that when we were together at Aquatech. We are walking those shows for now 10 years, and I'm pretty sure you were not stopped that much 5 or 6 years ago. Nowadays, with LinkedIn building a personal brand, you get stopped
Yeah.
by a lot of people, and it's not about
True.
fame. They're not asking you to
No.
sign on your boobs. It's more like, hey, I have an interesting business and an interesting project. What do you think of it? And that is really what I would put as the number one in the good about LinkedIn.
True. Fully agree. I mean, we had the example, right, in Munich, I think 4 weeks ago now, right? We just walked the floor and a
Time
couple of
flies.
people stopped us. Hey, guys, you are doing this and that, and we are interested in that. That is interesting. That is pretty interesting.
So that was the positive, Björn. I want to go to the negative because I'm a French guy, and the negative would be the bad. So, what is bad on LinkedIn? Let me start. I give you one, and then you give me
Okay.
yours. My
Okay.
first would be something which used to be the best of the best, and nowadays is the baddest of the baddest, and that is LinkedIn articles. I mean, LinkedIn used to have those things called Pulse. I think they even bought the platform. So Pulse was an external company. Pulse used to be the hot thing, exactly like SlideShare at some point was the hot thing.
Mm.
Those things, for whatever reason, got buried into the algorithm. And nowadays, I mean, I dare you to find an article. If you're not actively going to the very specific place on the profile of someone where you can go to activity, then to the tab which goes to article, and then you find it. That's the only place where you find it. Discoverability is not even zero, it's
Mm.
minus something. So the bad articles.
Fully agree. I mean, I started really 3-4 years ago writing articles. That's how I started my LinkedIn career. Meanwhile, I deleted all of them. But let's say the first reaction I really got, I mean, Other
I would
than that,
totally not thrive.
nobody was interested in that. Really, nobody. I got no views, nothing. The first reaction I got from my first boss was, "What are you doing there? Are you going to look for a new position, for a new job, or what are your goals with posting these kind of thoughts and things you're saying?" That is interesting, and I feel, first of all, before coming to my bad, is really, um, still we have this behavior today, right? People, let's say from the management, still saying, if you post, if one of the employees is posting or is somehow visible and is saying something controversial, that the people think, hey, they want to leave, they are looking for a new job, maybe they want to have more money, whatever, right? They see it just in a negative way, and we have to stop that.
I would
If people want to leave the company, they do not do that because of LinkedIn, they do it anyway,
I
right?
would go the extra step, which is, um, what I just explained about the funnel is not obvious if you're not from the same generation or if you're not familiar with marketing concepts. So if you're going to LinkedIn and you're posting, hey, we have the coolest product and it also toasting bread, buy it, then your top management is going to be very happy about that because you seem to be working hard on your job. But the fact is, if you post that, you're just going to get crickets and nobody wants to
Mm.
buy something that way.
True.
Whereas if you see it as a part of the funnel, but unfortunately, that's the only part of the funnel which is public, the next steps of the funnel are invisible, which means nobody can know what those next steps are unless they trust you. So it's a matter of trust. And I think, again, I know someone who wrote a pretty good white paper or book or in between on employee advocacy. And I think you should trust your employees to. I mean, it's that quote which is attributed to Steve Jobs, and I'm pretty sure he never said it, but still it's attributed to him. It's what if we let them do what they want and they leave? And the answer is, what if they stay? So
If we do nothing and they stay, yeah.
yeah,
If we do not invest in these people, that's true, that's exactly true. But let's say, coming back to my bad, unfortunately, Mr. Walid already took my bad, and is
yeah,
LinkedIn,
that's interesting. That's
it's
when it's
LinkedIn
interesting.
groups. I started really also with LinkedIn groups. I think I'm subscribed for 20 groups, and in the beginning I really started posting there as well, and there was just advertisement in, right? There was just bloody bullshit in, and so I think everybody really stopped going into groups, and that was a little bit my bad. So I spent a lot of times in the beginning with these groups, until I realized, okay, it is not worse. But if I understand you right, because in our prep call you said this, the
Yeah.
groups are coming back. i,
So
I, I can't I can't believe that.
let me just put that one, the ugly,
The ugly.
because groups, I wouldn't put it in bad. I would put it in ugly. If you had asked me 3 weeks ago, I would subscribe with my two hands on what you just said, both Walid and you, which is LinkedIn groups never, 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 never. And when I published my newsletter 2 weeks ago, when I hit publish, I got a pop up message from LinkedIn saying, hey, do you want to share it in groups? And that never happened before. And it was like, why are you proposing that? Because we all know that in groups you bury it. So I posted it in groups. And if I trace back 2 years ago when I started with the podcast, I was sharing it in group and I always got crickets and exactly what it said.
Mm.
If the owner didn't just push his own content, nobody would see it. So,
Mhm.
and when I share it in the group, instantly I got more traction with that group post than with the post on the main feed. And since then, I see that on my main LinkedIn, I see the group posts popping up when before they were buried like the articles. And interestingly, as well, the hashtag. I'm following hashtags like water industry or wastewater. And that was for nothing, just because at some point I thought, why not following it? And
This came
nowadays,
this came from Instagram.
I see it coming back. I
Mm.
see it really coming back to the top. Like, so I'm not saying invest in groups. We're not yet to that stage, but I think
Mm.
LinkedIn has gone too far in burying the groups. They realized
Mm.
it. And exactly like Facebook did a couple of years ago, they're bringing the groups back. So I would
Mm.
put a penny on the groups. So to me, that's an ugly. But sorry, I jumped
Okay.
to the ugly. Do you have more bads?
I don't have really more bad, but let's say we have reached now the uglies, and even now, Jim has taken a little bit the credit for that. What I wanted to say is, I mean, we are talking about our newsletter. I mean, the newsletter is something you can create if you have the content creator mode on, right? I mean, I know Jim has one, you have one, I have one, Adam has a water newsletter, so you can see this is in principle is nothing else than the article years ago, right? But now LinkedIn is pushing that and is playing that as a kind of email marketing. So that means in the end you are able to reach, if it is allowed by the user, you can go into the email account, into the email account from this person. They get the newsletter directly on the desk, and that is pretty interesting. So I started, I don't know, some 3 years ago, 2 years ago, with email marketing, and I pretty much failed. And then I took all the stuff I had right now and put them on the email newsletter, on the newsletter from LinkedIn, and that works pretty well. And that is an interesting fact. I would say an ugly. I don't know, because the fact in the beginning we started, we all had this. We started the first and we got 2,000 and even more subscribers. And then the growth rate is still there, but pretty slow. Right? I think Jim and I, we are on the same level. Antoine, you told me that you're losing
No,
subscribers.
I'm not losing
Well,
subscribers, but I'm not getting much.
but that's a little bit the fact
I
that
know someone who's losing.
that's why I would say it's a kind of ugly, because I don't know where this go to. I don't know really, but
Yeah,
let's say at the moment it works for me.
I would. I just put back the quote from Jim for one reason, which is to me, Jim's newsletter is a real newsletter, which I really enjoy
So
reading.
my one not.
Wait. I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Adam's one is a real newsletter, which I really enjoy reading. The problem with yours, Björn, is that I was subscribed to your original newsletter, so I already read it most of the time, but it's still very interesting. So, but I would put you in the same
Yeah.
category. Then
Okay.
you,
Hopefully, because you was originally reading that, so maybe now you can take the stuff and you can implement that, right? So that's even more
yeah,
helpful for
and
you.
actually, what I wanted to say is exactly what it is saying now, which is a newsletter was worth it before they introduced that creator mode and gave it and made it available to everyone. You really had to apply for the newsletter, like you had to apply for the LinkedIn Live, and I applied for the newsletter at that time, and they just I probably see them, they must be laughing in an office like, that guy wants to do a newsletter. Hey, let him drop away. So at that time, having a newsletter was something special, which means that there was a special tab where they would recommend you some newsletter, and that vanished because now everybody has a newsletter. And for people like you, like Adam, like Jim, who are doing something on purpose for the newsletter, you have people like me, which are repurposing their content. I mean, my infographic
Mhm.
now doesn't go into a carousel; it goes into a newsletter. I still do believe it's something interesting because it's really fresh content every week, which is produced and put only at that place and on my website. But still, it's not really made to be a newsletter. And then you have the other level of people which are just doing pure advertisement. I mean, I get suggestions to subscribe to a newsletter all the time, and
Every day.
yeah, and now you get to do a bit of sorting it out. And there's a last element which I would add here is that LinkedIn introduced the stories 1 year ago, and then people invested in stories. And again, Alex had a story every day, and I was trying to put a story every day. And then LinkedIn decided that stories was not interesting, and they killed stories. And if you had spent time to build your audience to stories, well, sorry for you, because it just vanished. So that's a bit my difficulty sometimes with LinkedIn.
Wha-
Today, newsletter is a bit pushed, but it might
But
also that in six
there's
months
an
is dead.
there's an interesting comment. For me, I don't see a name. You can use a newsletter as a library of use cases, info, etc. What most people don't know is that even a company can have a newsletter. And then it is exactly the case. So you can build your newsletter with case studies, with references, with technical whatever, right? Really, with white papers, you can copy your white paper into that. That is what you can really do. And most people don't use this very strong format, which is right now promoted by LinkedIn. They don't use it.
Yeah, that's a bit the thing, which is that today you have many tools to do a newsletter. And you have platforms like Twitter that just bought a platform of newsletter. Facebook is also buying their platform of newsletter. LinkedIn has it as a native function. You can go to your traditional marketing tool, which is also allowing you to do newsletters. When you were doing email marketing, what were you using?
At this time, Active Campaign.
Okay, I have been using Mailchimp in the past, or you can have on your WordPress. You have some plugins to do it. I mean, you have
Each
many,
and
many,
every
many,
web
many, many
page
tools.
has its own, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that LinkedIn's tool is not the best, technically
No, I'm
speaking,
I'm 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 not saying it is a best, but it's inside the
but it's
LinkedIn.
inside
It's
LinkedIn.
inside their
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and that is the interesting fact, because normally you cannot reach the people because, let's say, if I'm connected with you, Antoine, I don't have your contact details. I can't reach you outside the LinkedIn world. So that's what I mean. LinkedIn wants. They want to keep us in this bubble. So
Okay,
that's why they push that.
you give me an interesting transition
Too.
to another type of ugly.
Never
Actually,
tell.
an ugly I've used. Um, Let me just show it very, very shortly. I don't know if you know Phantom Buster. There's a couple of equivalent. You have Casper as well. You can be using. Um, you can. I mean, there are many tools like that. It's LinkedIn
Ah, yeah.
automation tools.
LinkedIn Helper, for instance, I know.
It's not. It's not fully the same.
Okay. Yeah.
Casper and Phantom Buster, exactly like Zapier does, for instance, or Integromat. What they do is that basically you have a library of actions, and some of these actions are perfectly legal. Some of these actions are shady, if not borderline. For instance,
Exactly.
you're mentioning you cannot reach to people outside, but many people put their email in their profile and it is in
Hmm.
public, which means you could be
Hmm.
manually going to the profiles and scraping the profiles. And then the other way to do that is to use a Phantom Buster or Casper or whatever and do
Hmm.
it for you. And actually, I would fully agree with that comment. Automation is the real ugly for LinkedIn. And I would say I'm guilty because when I
You
started,
you did that?
yeah, when I started on LinkedIn, I thought I was listening to podcasts quite a lot, a marketing podcast, and they were saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, you do that. You use Zapier, you integrate into Phantom
Mm.
Buster, and then you take that, you take it to prospecting, you bring it to Duck Soap, and I had all of them. All of them. You have a free trials of 3 months, so I used all of them simultaneously. And you reach to a point where, to me, the limit, and I'm sorry about that. I'm going to reveal the ugliest in my ugliest of ugliest of ugliest. I was trying automated messages like "Dear," open the bracket,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
surname, close the
mhm.
bracket. I've read your last post. It was very interesting. And then if people would react, then I would discuss with them. But at first, the first contact was fully automated. And that fully automated thing reached out to Menno Holterman, so the CEO of Nyhoot. And Menno Holterman was so kind to answer that shittiest message ever. And the problem is that you have only one chance to do a good first impression. And I'm not a good copywriter, so even that shitty mail was really shitty. And so my first impression I gave to Menno Holterman was that.
Mm.
Thank God I could then having on my microphone discuss one to one and explain him, hey, sorry you got caught in my automation. I'm really sorry about that. I stopped it because it's stupid, and that's why you should select the podcast you're listening to. But yeah, I fully
I
agree with
I
that.
ne I never use these kind of tools, never. I saw them all running around, and I checked a couple of, and especially LinkedIn Helper, which is pretty prominent. But the issue is, first of all, we see email addresses. Yes, you can take the email address out. For instance, go on my profile, you will find in my professional email address. You can take it out, and there are bots which take them all out, and then they reach all the people, put you on an email list, which is just not allowed. Be careful. GDPR, we have a lot of fines right now in Europe because of breaking the rules of GDPR, and that is exactly what GDPR means, right? You are
Yeah,
not allowed to
there's a
take
gray
just
zone.
an no, it's
Björn,
no, it's
there is a
definitely
gray zone.
not it's not a gray zone. It's not, never, ever, never.
Your email
You
is
cannot,
the email
you
of your
cannot,
business,
you
and
cannot, you take the email out, put them on the email list, and
not putting on an
start
email list. Not put. No,
and put,
I agree with
put
you.
them
Putting on an email
and
list
put them
is
on
illegal.
a newsletter. That is, do you
But
need the double opt-in
yeah, for the newsletter,
globally?
yes. But if they take
Full
your
stop.
email and they send
If
you directly an email and trying
That
to
is
sell
a
you
different
something,
case. That is a different case. But let's say what I've seen especially over the last months, because it's coming more and more, that I'm landing on an email list, right? Because Google is pretty cool and saying, hey, this is part of an email list. And then you have to get rid of that. And this is definitely not allowed. And the other thing why I would be very careful with these kind of LinkedIn, if LinkedIn's API realizes that you're using these kind of tools, you get not only be punished, you get be banned.
Okay.
Your entire profile can be blocked for a certain time.
The
And to get it back, it can be very, very painful. So be careful with these kind of tools.
I would not put that as a reason. I agree with you. I agree with Sorab as well, which I'm putting here as a message. That,
If
but
it is your only channel and you're losing your only
no, Björn,
channel,
I'm
I think then
300% sure that LinkedIn already knows exactly as soon as there's a robot doing something. They know it. And the
yeah.
only person which I know has been banned is a guy called Toinon Georget, which is pretty famous in France
Oh
because
no, I know many people. I
he
know
was
many
the one
people who lost
programming
their car
the
account.
tool.
No.
And as he was the one programming the tool, I mean, you have to be really extreme to get banned. So, but to me, that's not the argument. The argument is not about you're going to get banned. The argument is about what is the impression you want to make to people, and that is just about the ugly.
I
But
mean, if you do it right, if you use these kind of helpers right, and the copy is good, and you're reaching many Holterman, you can even with a copy which is fully automated written, you can reach him, right, and you get your goals. So it
I
can
don't think so.
it
I
can be
really don't
worse.
think so. Um, but okay, I would just not use it because it's not good for you on the long term. It's not sustainable. I fully agree with what Sorab is saying here.
Yeah,
Time is flying. I didn't want to
sure.
spend the entire hour just on LinkedIn. So very, very swiftly, let's go to that one. I say fast because you already touched
Okay.
on email marketing. So do you have
Email
anything more?
marketing, yeah. I would not say I failed with that, but let's say it's pretty hard to reach your goals with email marketing because you have to build an email list, and that is the hardest stuff. So that means you have to find ways uh, to get emails. So that's all about, right? So, and in principle, people will not give it for free. So that means you have to give them something in exchange. So that means you have to build something pretty cool, something pretty nice. For instance, I tried with my book, right? With my, well, it's not a book, it's like a booklet. And so I could collect a couple of emails, and then you can put them into a cool newsletter. You can have a cool funnel where you can bring the people to. In principle, it is a very effective tool. But let's say to get the email addresses is the hard way. It's really the hard way, and that's why we are talking about the LinkedIn newsletter, which is at the moment pretty easy. But let's say if you go outside, it is much more harder, especially if you want to reach the right people you want to have business with.
I would agree and disagree. Um,
Or as always.
if I take my
Okay.
example, I'm getting the emails because if you go to my website, if you go to dww.show/podcast, you can find all the episodes I've released, and on the top you can just enter your mail, and then you get my book from season 1 and my book from season 2. So you get like 200 pages of infographics, and every day I get subscription. Every day I get people giving their mail to get that book. So I wouldn't say it's that difficult once you have sufficiently good content to attract people. But where I fully agree with you is that then I never sent a newsletter. So for what am I collecting emails? I'm still wondering myself. So
If there's no reason how to use them, I mean, you have to think about that. Let's say if you don't want to use them, you build a wall, you build a kind of paywall. The people have to pay with their email address, and if there's no reason for you using this email, then you can give it for free, because then you share it more often as if you would have a paywall between. So that is the only reason.
it's about,
Email
yeah,
marketing is pretty powerful. Yeah, it is, absolutely. And it's easy to build. Registration for webinars, events, etc. Well, if you find the golden key, well, congrats, Walid.
I think it's about the funnel again. It depends
Yeah,
what's your next step in the funnel. For me, it's not that useful because my next step in the funnel would, I mean, it's not sending a mail to someone, it's having a conversation with someone if that's
yeah.
the right someone. So email doesn't serve me, so I'm not using it. If I take the approach from Wallet, which is having this very, very interesting events where he gathers a lot of speakers, a lot of very, very
There you get
interesting
a lot of
minds, then that is one step in his funnel, which he feeds with the email. So I think that makes it much more
But
attractive.
and I told him, so he will be good with that if I say that. Even Walid was not in compliance with GDPR. But I told him that.
What?
Oh yeah, he did.
He's based in Dubai. He doesn't care.
Well, he should care if he's going to Europe. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So that's about LinkedIn marketing, email marketing. We made. What would be the next one which you want to cover, Björn? I have some more. Which one do you want?
Podcast.
Okay. Okay. Hear me right. Don't start a podcast. Don't.
Okay, next.
And then start a podcast. Actually, those two antagonisms are very present. Don't start a podcast. Why? Because a podcast is very, very, very difficult to take off. There is no virality, there's no discoverability. You're going to be the smallest of the smallest of the smallest on the platform. You might know me a bit now for the Don't Waste Water podcast. It happens that it's not my first podcast. I've had other ones before. There's one which is even still online, which is in French. And when I posted my first podcast, I was really expecting to see like the downloads, like, I have my podcast out. I must have hundreds of people now listening to it. And no, that's not happening. Not at all. And no chance that like you have the coolest cat video, even if nobody knows you. If your cat does something funny and you post it on TikTok, YouTube, or wherever, you will get your views. That's not the case with podcasts. So if you do podcasts to get a lot of views, forget it, or be sure that you're there for the long run. The vast majority of podcast stops before episode 7, which means if you survive episode 7, you're a survivor. 90 to 95% of the podcasts out there are dead. And I know what I'm speaking about because most of my podcasts are dead. There's only one which is alive, which is the one I'm pushing now for 2 years. So that's why you should not start a podcast. Now, why should you start a podcast? Because first, you get to speak with awesome people, which would not speak to you if you were not having a podcast. So that is really something which is to me a strong plus. And number two, you get to have very meaningful conversation which elevates you at each discussion you have. I mean, when I discussed with you, I learned marketing. When I discussed with Walid, I learned something about LinkedIn. When I discussed with Jim and Adam, I learned something about storytelling. When I'm discussing with Andrew Benedict, I learned how you can be pushing in the desert for 15 years without having any traction and still believe you're going to land somewhere and become multimillionaire and change the world actually for the better. When I'm discussing with Mina Goody, which I mentioned, and so far and so on, every single of my podcast guests has learned me something. So those are the two. That's why podcast would be somewhere in the ugly, because it's a lot of effort and it's totally worth it if you're in it for the right reasons, and it's totally not worth it if you're in for the fame.
Personal phone call, not a driver. Phone closely, I guess. Okay, a lot of stuff is coming in right now. But just one more 2 cents from my end about podcasts. I mean, the issue with podcasts is that you don't know who is listening. So, for instance, you don't know, Antoine, that I was listening the last episode. So that means you cannot build up a funnel behind that. So it is all about credibility, mostly, right? And you can create attention with that. But let's say to build a funnel on that based on the podcast is pretty hard due to the fact that you don't get the information, that you don't get the information about your subscribers, about your listeners. That's my stuff. But it is pretty, as you're right, it's pretty hard. It's pretty expensive also. But it is really, really powerful.
That's where you and me disagree, because you see podcast as a Joe Rogan podcast or whatever it is your favorite German
No.
podcast which you're mentioning all the time.
How much hours do you spend on a
Okay,
podcast?
expensive in time. Agree.
This is how I measure. It's not only about how much money you put on the table. It's also your hours you are spending.
Agree.
Okay.
But like you would be taking a course or you'd be taking an MBA, and here the difference is the MBA is free because you get people to come to be happy to share their wisdom. I mean, yeah, I'm now at 100 people which I interviewed, and 100 times I learned something, if not many things. So for that, it's worth it. What do you take next?
YouTube.
I propose you. No. YouTube is going to be the last one because YouTube, you can spend another hour on it.
Okay.
I just have a very short one about. Actually, long before the trend for newsletter, the place to go for written content was Medium is still Medium. There's a big audience on Medium for people who are wanting to read the coolest blog there is. And that is true and is still true today. I've tested it. If you write on Medium and you get published by a publication, so I got published by a publication called Better Marketing, and you get a lot of claps, which is the likes on Medium. You get a lot of views, and I was really glad about it. I wanted to put that on my LinkedIn profile and tell everyone that I was
Mhm.
a writer for Better Marketing. But then the problem is that where does that lead me? Nowhere, because those
Mm.
thousands of people which clapped on my Better Marketing articles, well, they have nothing to do with the water industry. They are marketing people which are looking for marketing advice to take off a podcast or to do some stuff on LinkedIn like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Um, those people, you cannot convert them to anything else in your funnel. So that was to me a lost effort, but something which I wanted to mention here, because sometimes numbers can be good, all the vanity meters can be really good, and still the result is not good.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you have to be clear in the beginning. What is your goal? What is your goal with what do you do, right? And is this platform the right one? I mean, you can get lost on how many platforms we have. I mean, we touched just 3 or 4 right now, right? And I think we have more than 10 we can play, right? And that's why you have to be clear in the beginning. What are you going to do? Is it achieving your goal? And I mean, we discussed it in the beginning. You should have definitely, before you going to the next, you should master the one which is the most important one for you. Before playing on each and every channel, you should find the one channel which gives the highest value back, and master that channel, master that one, and then you can go to the next if you don't reach the next audience anymore.
I take Isabel's question and put my jingle just because. What do we think of Twitter? I'll
Is
start.
it
I'm going to let you, Björn. Um,
is a very easy one. Very bad for a Europe market. That's all.
okay, I would be less extreme. I would say Twitter is very good if you started 10 years ago. Um, and sorry, if you're starting today, don't bother if you go to the Twitter itself.
Yeah.
Now, Twitter, since last week, is having a blog function, which means every time one of these platforms is releasing something which is fully new, it's an opportunity because you can take some spaces. And actually,
Mm,
Spaces was the name of their copycat of Clubhouse, which is
mm.
also something you can try on Twitter. So if I was to go on Twitter nowadays, which I'm not doing, but I would try to put blog articles, or I would try to go to Spaces, not go to tweeting, just that, because
Yeah.
you don't
But
have 10
you
years of an audience.
but you can see even Twitter is losing a little bit the soul. So that means they're putting other channels like the space. So that means the audience function or the blog function. They put them all to two because they want to open their business model, right? So then
Yeah,
you can stay to the one you're already in if it is LinkedIn because you have the same functions there. So
yeah, but
makes some
that's
sense for me because but the audience in the US and North America, they are using much more Twitter as we in Europe, especially in our niche, because we're always in our niche in the water industry. The water industry on Twitter, I don't see that.
I would slightly again disagree with you, Björn, as you would expect. Because if you were doing LinkedIn as you were doing LinkedIn 10 years ago, you would be having crickets. If you're sharing slide shares and writing articles, then I mean, what I'm saying here is that all these platforms are evolving all the time and you have to follow where
True,
they are heading.
true.
Twitter was ready, is still quite hot for threads,
I'm,
sorry, and threads might be disappearing and replaced by blogs. So it's the
I'm, I'm,
hottest
I'm
thing.
not, I'm not saying that they are not able to evolve. Maybe it's good for Twitter. What I'm saying is that they will not reach, or that at the moment they are not able to reach the European market in a way that it is really useful for us. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Let's take another one. Inside this one, I want to pack everything which is new. So it's not only TikTok, because I hear people
Mm.
saying TikTok is awesome, and honestly, I've tried it. Go to my TikTok, you will see they're pretty cool videos. But I didn't get much because I couldn't convert it. But I would put in the same pocket TikTok, Clubhouse, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Twitter Spaces, the new audio function for LinkedIn. And what I'd like to have here, your opinion, Björn, is when one of these new platforms comes, what do you do?
At least you should have a look. I mean, think about what happened 1 year ago now, no, 2 years ago, with Clubhouse. Clubhouse was the hottest new kid on the block, right? So it came out of nowhere, had a million of followers overnight, and nobody was sure how this will end. So at least if something like this comes up, you should have a look. You should test it a little bit. You should read experience, and maybe you should try a little bit,
How long?
test a little bit. I don't know. I can't say how long, but let's say so long that you get at least a feeling. So we tried the same with Clubhouse. So we jumped into the rooms, we checked out the rooms. I mean, Andrew Walker, for instance, he was pretty active with Tom Freiberg. They were pretty active
Every
on
week there was a
Clubhouse
room. Yeah,
every week, and I jumped in every week. And I wanted to get a feeling. I couldn't get a feeling. It was not about the what they did. It was about the Clubhouse function and the Clubhouse itself. And I mean, look where Clubhouse is right now. Is that so? But that doesn't mean that it was not worse. So if something new comes up, at least you should figure that out. You should check this out, whether it is worth at least spending some time on it and going a little bit deeper.
I would just say beware of the bandwagon in the sense that I
Yeah.
hear people saying that YouTube Shorts is awesome, so I get excited because I think, oh, if I'm doing that, then I'm gonna get thousands of views. So I try YouTube Shorts, and then I get hundreds of views, and I'm disappointed just because I heard that it was thousands and I get hundreds. But if I
Mm.
was not expecting anything, well, hundreds of views is already pretty cool, and who knows where that leads you if you're 30 videos in, 60 videos in, 100 videos in. So it's about managing your expectations. And I think coming back to the podcast experience, um, when I started the Don't Waste Water podcast, I was expecting to get zero download for 6 months. I had prepared my brain to that. I had prepared to push a dead body for 6 months. I was lucky. I was really lucky that it took off much faster. But that
Mm.
is only luck, and you have to. It's like when you go to the casino. You take your money, you change it into chips. If you still believe that your chips are money, then you're going to lose because that is really what you don't want to do. You have to consider at that point in time your money is lost, and then you play the chips, and that is the time you invest in a new thing. If you invest in TikTok, then say I'm going to invest 3 months in TikTok, and that time is lost, whatever I'm doing. And then you evaluate after 3 months and you see in retrospect,
Okay.
was it worth it?
Okay. But I give you another example. We did the same 1.5 years ago with this water show. We had no clue. We had no expectations. We had really no expectation. And we start something. We had no clue how that works. We figured out how Restream works, how this broadcasting works. LinkedIn Live was a pain in the ass to get this LinkedIn Live, right? So that we could really broadcast, that we could really have our show here. And we really in the beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, Waleed, Quatsch, Antoine. We really thought from one episode to the next. The first 4 5 episode was really from the first to the second to the third. We had no clue where this goes to, and now we have bigger plans. But let's say it is always a long-term game, always.
The difference I fully agree with you for once. Uh, don't get don't get used to it. The difference is we were very lucky that our very first episode was very successful. I'm just
Oh
saying
yeah,
to all the people out there, don't expect your first post to be good. Don't expect your first TikTok to be good. Don't expect your first YouTube video to be good. And even if it is brilliant and it gets zero view, you're one step further. So that's just the message which I wish
yeah, yeah.
I had known 10 years ago, because my very first job was to be an influencer with big. I have to tell that story one day. But um, and honestly, it would have helped me quite a lot if someone had told me it's okay. You get 300 views.
Mm,
That's great. That's awesome.
mm.
Imagine 300 people in a room listening to you who are just you just got you're just a graduate. Why would people listen to you? And still 300 people are in that room. Of course, if you watch Joe Rogan, who's making 10 millions downloads on his podcast, if you're watching Mr. Beast, who was soon 100 million followers on YouTube, then you feel like you're nobody. But remember that the Nyan Cat has millions of views, and I'm not sure it's the most qualitative content there was ever on the internet. So if there's one conclusion to me for all of that is yeah, try it out. We hear it from everybody in the water industry that we need as an industry to make more noise,
Yeah.
need to be more present out there, and we shouldn't rely on Björn, on Walid, on Alex, and whoever is on we mentioned today, Jim, Adam, all the ones out there, Tom, Andrew, Will Sarney. It's about every single water professional to have a voice and to start publishing stuff.
And let's say from final conclusion from my end is really, I over the last 2 years I never had someone really shooting on me, right? The people are, they are really really nice on LinkedIn. We are here not on Facebook, we are not on Instagram. I mean, I'm the guy who's trying to be provocative, right? I'm trying to go over the edge to, to get at least something out of the people, because I want to have this controversial debate. So that means I'm sometimes over the edge. I know that. But even then, the people are not coming and finger pointing to you and saying you're a bloody asshole. No, they are still nice. They're still nice, and nobody's really against you. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't hurt. Come out here. Come on stage. Do whatever you think you should do, and forget thinking and looking just for the numbers.
And honestly, make our life difficult. Walid mentioned that newsletter
Oh
might
yeah,
be crowded and everything, but I hope that stage to be crowded, because if it's crowded, if there's another water show, if there's another Don't Waste Water podcast, if there's another newsletter from someone similar to you, Björn, doing water marketing, that's going to make us all better. We
yeah.
need that. We need that emulation. We need to have that cool content out there to get inspired and to keep pushing. So I
Mhm.
guess we are far over time, and I'm sorry about that, but I think we could have spent 1 more hour on the topic. If you have more questions, the chat is still going to be active for the next 1 week. LinkedIn is that way. It's difficult to reach out to the messages. So if you've listened and watched up to that point, I strongly encourage you, if you have questions, feedback, to go to Björn or myself directly in the
Put them in.
messages, in direct message. Write to us, tell us what you think about the show, where you want us to head it next. We have a lot of plans, we have a lot of ideas we want to go next. Summer is going to be a bit of a special season, but you will get nice surprises in a very close future. We wanted to share that with you, with our community, a bit what we learned on LinkedIn, what we learned on the other platforms. So that was the reason for today. And yeah, we had weird interactions today because we are both with brains which are not fully functional. But
Yeah.
as always,
It was a COVID show, right? We had a
yeah,
COVID
it
show
was a coach.
today. So very interesting. It was an interesting experience, especially for me today. All
So
right.
thanks, everyone.
Th-
And
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Antoine.
thanks, Björn. And see you soon.
See you very soon. Bye bye.